The morning sun stretched across the quiet streets of Akron, Ohio, as Marcus Hall tightened the last strap, securing his dirt bike to the bed of his old blue Ford F-150. It was a Saturday in early June 2018, and the air buzzed with the kind of excitement that only comes before an adventure. Marcus, 24 years old, was known for two things: his devotion to his family and his passion for dirt biking. He had bought his Kawasaki KX450 after saving paychecks from his job at a local warehouse. It wasn't just a bike to him, it was freedom, pride, and a ticket to be part of a bigger world. This weekend, he was heading north to Detroit, about 3 hours away, where a few friends from an online biking forum had organized an underground urban ride-out. Marcus had never ridden in a city like Detroit before. He told his mother, Sharon Hall, that it would be a quick trip. Just one night, maybe two. He'd ride the abandoned streets, meet some fellow bikers, then head home in time for Sunday dinner. "I'll be back before you miss me," he joked, kissing Sharon on the cheek. She smiled, but inside, she worried. Mothers always worry, and Detroit had a reputation. A city scarred by crime, economic collapse, and dark corners where bad things happened unnoticed. But Sharon didn't want to be the one to dim her son's happiness. Marcus had been working so hard lately. He deserved this. At 9 a.m., Marcus texted his cousin Jalen, who had planned to follow him up the next day. "On my way up. Keep your phone close." He pulled out of the driveway with the radio thumping and his dirt bike gleaming in the back, heading west toward the freeway. It would be the last time anyone in Akron would see Marcus Hall. On the road, Marcus stayed in touch. A few text messages here and there, updates about traffic, jokes about bad drivers, a photo of a greasy cheeseburger from a highway diner he stopped at for lunch. Everything seemed fine, normal. Around 1:45 p.m., Marcus called his mother. "I'm about an hour out," he said. "Gonna meet up with some guys at the old Packard plant. They're doing a ride-out near there." "Be careful," Sharon warned. "I always am," Marcus laughed. "I'll call you tonight. Promise." That was the last time she heard his voice. The next few hours were a blur no one could ever fully reconstruct. By 6 p.m., Marcus hadn't called. By 8 p.m., Sharon's texts went unanswered. By midnight, panic had set in. Jalen tried reaching the Detroit contacts Marcus had mentioned, but their phones were off or going straight to voicemail. It didn't make sense. Marcus wasn't the type to just vanish without a word. He hated making his mother worry. He hated missing out on time with his little daughter, Maya, who was just 3 years old. By sunrise the next day, Sharon and Jalen were on the road to Detroit themselves, driving the route Marcus had taken, praying they would spot his truck, his bike, anything. They never did. Marcus Hall had disappeared, and the city of Detroit, vast and indifferent, had swallowed him whole. The first 48 hours after Marcus's disappearance felt like a dream. A horrible, slow-moving dream where everything was slightly out of focus. The drive to Detroit was filled with heavy silence. Sharon gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Jalen kept checking Marcus's location on his phone, but the last ping was hours old, somewhere near an abandoned industrial part of the city. When they reached Detroit, reality hit harder than either of them expected. The city was a maze of empty buildings and cracked streets. Entire neighborhoods stood hollow, abandoned like the set of a post-apocalyptic movie. East Grand Boulevard, where Marcus had last mentioned meeting friends, stretched long and desolate, lined with graffiti-stained warehouses and crumbling brick factories. It was a city that had lost its soul decades ago, and it seemed like the perfect place for a young man to simply disappear. They filed a missing persons report that afternoon at a nearby Detroit police precinct. The officer behind the desk took down the details: Marcus's name, age, last known location, what he was wearing, and that distinctive green Kawasaki dirt bike. But his face was neutral, almost weary. Young black men went missing in Detroit far too often. Sometimes they resurfaced. Sometimes they didn't. "We'll keep an eye out," the officer said, handing Sharon a case number. "But he's an adult. He has the right to disappear if he wants to." Sharon's voice cracked with frustration. "He didn't just walk away. Something's wrong." The officer nodded mechanically but offered little more. Sharon and Jalen left the station feeling smaller than when they had entered. The next move was obvious. They had to look themselves. Armed with printed flyers and stacks of Marcus's photos, they began canvassing the streets. Gas stations, laundromats, liquor stores, street corners where groups of men eyed them warily. "Have you seen him?" Sharon would ask over and over, voice quivering, hope bleeding into every word. Most shook their heads. Some looked away. A few muttered, "Try the Packard plant." But no one wanted to say more. The Packard automotive plant, once a symbol of American industrial pride, was now a vast, skeletal ruin, stretching nearly a mile across Detroit's east side. Its collapsing walls and broken glass windows loomed like the bones of a dead giant. Homeless camps dotted its perimeter. Drug deals happened openly in its shadows. It was the kind of place you entered at your own risk and often didn't come back from. Sharon stood at the chain-link fence surrounding the plant, clutching a flyer of her son. Behind her, Jalen stared grimly at the expanse of decay. "Maybe someone saw something," he said. "Maybe." He didn't finish the thought, because they both knew, if Marcus had come here, there was every chance he never left. Despite their fear, they pressed on. They talked to street racers who knew about the underground dirt bike scene. They slipped flyers under car windshield wipers. They even offered a cash reward, $5,000 for any information leading to Marcus's safe return. Weeks passed, then months. The seasons changed. The trail grew colder. Each call to the police yielded the same flat response. No updates at this time. Marcus's case slid quietly into Detroit's swelling list of missing persons files. Just another name, another vanishing. But for Sharon, every day without answers was a new kind of grief. A wound that refused to heal. And somewhere in the bowels of Detroit, a secret about what happened to Marcus Hall lay buried, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Hope has a strange way of lingering, even when logic says it shouldn't. In the months following Marcus's disappearance, Sharon refused to let her son's memory fade into another unsolved headline. She made it her full-time mission to find him, or at least find out what had happened. But Detroit was an ocean of dead ends, and every clue seemed to sink before it reached the surface. The first so-called lead came 3 weeks after Marcus vanished. A man called Sharon's burner phone, the number printed on thousands of missing posters scattered throughout the city. He claimed he'd seen a green dirt bike matching Marcus's description being ridden near Gresham Avenue 2 nights after Marcus went missing. He was with 2 other dudes, the caller said. Bike looked fresh, like brand new. Same green. Sharon's heart leapt. Maybe Marcus had gotten caught up in something, but maybe he was alive. She and Jalen rushed to Gresham Avenue, scanning every alley, every parking lot, questioning anyone who would talk. They camped in Jalen's truck, watching groups of bikers roar past in the night, engines shrieking into the darkness. But Marcus wasn't among them. When they traced the number that tipped them off, it led to a disconnected burner phone. A dead lead. Then came the rumors. People whispered that the urban radios had gone sideways that weekend. Fights breaking out over stolen bikes, turf wars between rival crews. Some said there were hidden rules in Detroit's underground biking community. Show respect. Pay homage to the local kings. Outsiders who didn't understand those rules could find themselves in serious trouble. But no one was willing to say it outright. Snitching could get you killed. Talking too much about a missing outsider wasn't good for business or survival. One mechanic near 7 Mile reluctantly admitted he had heard about a kid from Ohio who showed up cocky, flashing his new bike, bragging he could ride better than anyone else. "That don't sit right with folks around here," the mechanic said, voice low. "Sometimes you gotta know when to stay quiet and keep your head down." Sharon pressed him for more, but he shook his head. "I ain't trying to die," he muttered, walking away. In September, the police found an abandoned truck matching the description of Marcus's Ford F-150. It was stripped bare, tires gone, seats torn out, windshield smashed, and dumped behind an abandoned gas station on Detroit's west side. The VIN matched. It was Marcus's, but there was no sign of him. No sign of the dirt bike either. It was as if he had been peeled away from the world, leaving only scraps behind. The weeks dragged into months. Winter cloaked Detroit in snow and silence. The posters faded on telephone poles and boarded up windows, forgotten by a city that moved on quickly from lost souls. Sharon didn't move on. Every weekend, she drove up from Akron to Detroit, sometimes alone, sometimes with Jalen or a small group of volunteers. She retraced Marcus's last known steps. She followed internet tips from psychics, strangers, and well-meaning but clueless people who swore they had visions of Marcus in this warehouse or that alley. Nothing panned out. Even the media slowly lost interest. The initial flurry of local news reports gave way to other tragedies, other missing faces. Marcus became another cold case, collecting dust on a detective's desk. By the first anniversary of his disappearance, Sharon organized a candlelight vigil at the spot where Marcus's truck was found. Only a handful of people showed up: family, close friends, a couple of activists who believed Detroit needed to take missing black men seriously. Sharon lit a white candle and held up a photo of Marcus, grinning, proud, sitting atop his gleaming green Kawasaki. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered into the night, "I'm not giving up on you, baby. I will find you, no matter how long it takes." At that moment, no one could have known that Marcus's bike, the key to unraveling the mystery, was still out there, hidden, changing hands, waiting for the day it would roar back into the light and finally tell the truth. 7 years is a long time to carry unanswered questions. 7 birthdays, 7 Christmas mornings, 7 empty seats at family dinners. For Sharon Hall, every passing year without Marcus felt like a heavy chain tightening around her chest. Most people in her life gently urged her to find peace, to accept that Marcus was gone. But Sharon refused to bury a son without proof. Hope, however faint, still flickered inside her. And then, on a humid June morning, it happened. The phone call that changed everything. It started with a routine traffic stop on Detroit's west side. An unregistered motorcycle caught the attention of a sharp-eyed patrol officer. The rider, an unfamiliar man in his late 20s with a history of petty theft, was weaving recklessly through traffic, trying to outrun police. After a brief chase, he crashed into a light pole and was arrested at the scene. When officers examined the wrecked dirt bike, something didn't add up. The green Kawasaki was old, its paint chipped, the VIN number partially scratched off, but some identifiers remained intact. A partial serial number under the frame, an old, faded sticker on the underside of the seat, a homemade modification on the clutch, something small, but distinctive. When they ran the partial VIN through national databases, a hit came back. Reported stolen. Linked to a missing persons case. Marcus Hall, Akron, Ohio. 7 years ago. The officer froze, staring at the screen. It felt like a ghost reaching out from the grave. Within hours, Sharon received a call from Detective Lisa Harmon, someone she hadn't heard from in years. "Mrs. Hall," the detective said, her voice tight, "I need you to come to Detroit. We found something connected to your son." Sharon dropped the phone in shock. Her hands shook violently as she picked it back up. "Is he?" She couldn't finish. "Please," the detective said gently. "Just come." Within hours, Sharon was on the road, the familiar highway blurring under her tires. Every mile closer to Detroit brought a surge of dread and fragile hope. At the station, Detective Harmon laid it all out. The man arrested, DeAndre Dre Whitmore, claimed he bought the bike months ago off a dude at a party for cash. No paperwork, no questions asked. At first, Dre was defensive, claiming he had no idea the bike was stolen. But under pressure, his story crumbled. He admitted he bought the bike through Detroit's underground trade, where stolen vehicles passed hands like currency. When detectives pressed harder, Dre mumbled something strange. "I ain't the first who had it," he said. "That bike been passed around. Lotta people touched it." That chilling admission opened a floodgate. The bike had survived 7 years on the streets, traded, repainted, modified, raced, and hidden. Its history concealed by fear and criminal codes of silence. Whoever originally stole it, whoever had it first, might have known exactly what happened to Marcus. Maybe they were still out there. Maybe they were still riding. Sharon was allowed to see the bike now locked in an evidence room. The moment she laid eyes on it, she crumbled. Despite the worn paint and damage, she recognized it instantly. The scuff mark near the handlebars where Marcus had wiped out learning tricks. The custom green flame decals they had picked out together at the motocross shop. It was his. There was no doubt. Tears blurred her vision as she ran her hand over the battered seat, whispering her son's name like a prayer. For the first time in 7 long years, Marcus's trail wasn't cold anymore. There were answers just out of reach. And Sharon knew one thing. She would chase them no matter what dark places they led her into, because her boy deserved the truth, no matter how ugly it was. DeAndre Whitmore had answers, just not the ones Detective Harmon or Sharon Hall desperately needed. Under intense interrogation, Dre finally admitted he hadn't owned the green Kawasaki long. Only about 4 months, he said. Before that, the dirt bike had belonged to someone else. Someone the streets knew well. Tyrone T-Man Briggs. The name made even seasoned detectives pause. T-Man was a legend in Detroit's underground. A man whose life was a twisted collage of petty crime, gang affiliations, and whispered violence. If there was stolen property moving through the city, especially bikes, chances were T-Man's fingerprints were somewhere in the background. And for the first time, Marcus's disappearance wasn't just a tragic accident or random crime. It looked personal. It looked planned. T-Man had a reputation. Ruthless, paranoid, deadly when crossed. He wasn't some reckless kid. He was a survivor of the street wars that gutted Detroit in the early 2000s. He knew the rules and he made sure everyone else played by them or paid the price. Detectives discovered that T-Man was particularly territorial about 2 things: his crew and bikes. He ran a tight circle of riders who viewed themselves as kings of the underground. And according to Dre and a few scared confidential informants, T-Man had a long memory for anyone who disrespected him, even outsiders. Especially outsiders. Digging deeper, Detective Harmon pieced together a chilling picture. The weekend Marcus vanished, T-Man's crew had hosted an unofficial ride-out across Detroit. Hundreds of bikers flooded the streets in an unofficial, illegal parade. No helmets, no rules, just roaring engines and flashes of neon under the city lights. Marcus had unknowingly inserted himself into the heart of it. An outsider, a stranger flaunting a brand new, spotless Kawasaki 450. Worse yet, witnesses said Marcus might have challenged T-Man's authority without realizing it. A dirt bike stunt-off had taken place that night. Informants claimed Marcus, young and fearless, had shown off, pulling wheelies, doing burnout tricks, earning shouts and applause from the crowd. In T-Man's world, that was seen as a challenge. An insult. One informant, too terrified to go on record, whispered it into Harmon's ear during a late-night meeting. He ain't know the rules. You don't outshine T-Man in his city. You don't show up fresh, flossin', unless you ready to pay the price. The night Marcus vanished, T-Man was seen riding with 2 other men, both members of his inner circle. None of them had spoken about that night. None of them had been questioned before now. When police tried to bring T-Man in, they hit a wall. He had vanished, gone underground. Some said he fled the city. Others claimed he was still around, protected by a network of loyalty and fear. The only thing certain was this: T-Man had once possessed Marcus's bike. And chances were, he had been one of the last people to see Marcus alive. Sharon sat across from Detective Harmon in the quiet aftermath of the briefing, her hands clenched into fists. "Find him," she said, voice trembling with grief and rage. "I don't care what it takes. Find him. And make him tell me what he did to my son." The detective nodded grimly. They were closer than ever. But closing in on T-Man wouldn't just be a police matter. In a city built on silence, fear, and blood, bringing down a ghost like T-Man would require breaking rules and risking everything. Because some truths don't come quietly. Sometimes they come kicking and screaming out of the darkness. Finding T-Man wasn't going to happen through normal channels. In Detroit's underground, police badges only shut doors, or worse, made people disappear. Detective Harmon knew if they wanted answers, they would have to step into the same shadows Marcus unknowingly walked into 7 years ago. She pulled together a small task force, officers who understood the delicate balance of pressure and patience required to navigate a community built on distrust. They started small: barbershops, auto body garages, dive bars where old bikers nursed cheap whiskey and memories, places where loyalty was currency and fear was a second language. First, nobody wanted to talk. T-Man was a ghost wrapped in a legend. Everyone knew his name. No one dared say it out loud. "He gone," one man muttered while fixing a tire in a grimy shop. "Y'all too late." Another, older biker named Red shook his head when asked, "You think the devil leaves tracks?" "Nah, man like T-Man. He only shows up when he wants something. Otherwise, you might as well be hunting the wind." But slowly cracks appeared. The fear wasn't as strong as it once was. T-Man's crew had scattered over the years. Some were dead. Some were locked up. Others had simply grown old, tired of the streets and the blood that came with it. A few younger bikers, eager to carve out their own reputations, whispered what the old heads wouldn't. T-Man was still alive, still in Detroit, and he wasn't just hiding, he was running. Sources claimed he'd holed up in an abandoned warehouse on the east side. Once a thriving auto parts factory, now nothing more than rotting concrete and broken glass. The perfect hideout for a man living between worlds. Detective Harmon tightened the net. Surveillance, undercover informants, carefully planted rumors to flush him out. Each day brought new risks. Each lead walked a razor's edge between breakthrough and disaster. Meanwhile, Sharon Hall refused to stay sidelined. She haunted the neighborhoods herself, armed with nothing but old photos of Marcus and a heart full of determination. She talked to anyone who would listen. Corner kids, old women sitting on stoops, shop owners who shook their heads sadly when they saw her coming. The story of a mother searching for her son, 7 years later, touched something deep in the community. Walls began to crack, and from those cracks, a terrifying new truth began to seep out. Marcus hadn't just disappeared. He had been taken. Some said he was lured. Others said he was confronted after the ride out, pulled aside by T-Man's crew under the pretense of talking bikes. He never stood a chance. Young, alone, outnumbered. They wanted his bike. They wanted to make an example. And when Marcus refused to back down, when he fought back, something went wrong. Very wrong. Now the clock was ticking. T-Man knew the police were closing in. He knew old ghosts were being stirred. And desperate men are dangerous men. Detective Harmon knew that if they didn't find him soon, T-Man might disappear again. Forever this time. Or worse, he might silence the past the only way he knew how. With blood. The sun hadn't yet risen over Detroit when the team assembled. Gray clouds rolled across the sky like bruises. The abandoned warehouse sat squat and silent on the east side, framed by skeletal trees and rusted-out cars. It was time. Detective Harmon stood by the armored van, briefing the squad in hushed tones. "We go in fast. We go in hard. He's armed. He's dangerous. And he knows we're coming." Each officer checked their weapons. Kevlar vests creaked under tension. Faces were grim, focused. 7 years. 7 years since Marcus Hall disappeared into Detroit's night. 7 years of silence, lies, and heartbreak. Today they would crack it open. The warehouse stank of mold and oil. Broken windows gaped like missing teeth. Faded graffiti warned no snitches across the walls. Inside, somewhere in the dark, Tyrone T-Man Briggs was waiting. SWAT took the lead. The first door was chained shut. Bang! Bolt cutters snapped through. Flashbangs in first. The world erupted in light and sound. Boom! Screams. Officers poured in, weapons raised, slicing the air with shouted commands. "Police! Get on the ground! Show me your hands!" They found 2 men immediately, lookouts, probably barely more than kids. Hands raised, faces frozen in fear. But no T-Man. Not yet. The deeper they pushed into the warehouse, the darker it became. No power. Only the thin beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the gloom. Then a noise. Footsteps. Fast and desperate. T-Man was running. East stairwell. An officer barked. Harmon took off, boots slamming against cracked concrete. She chased the shadow through labyrinthine halls littered with old tires, shattered glass, and forgotten machinery. Up a twisted staircase. Across a sagging catwalk. T-Man was fast, but desperation made him sloppy. He slipped, recovered, but it cost him precious seconds. Seconds Harmon needed. With a final surge, she tackled him to the ground. They crashed into the dust and grime, struggling. T-Man fought like a cornered animal, wild, vicious. But he was no match for years of rage and justice burning inside Harmon. She cuffed him hard, yanking his arms behind his back. "It's over, Tyrone," she spat, breathing heavy. "You're done running." Dragged back downstairs, T-Man spat blood onto the floor and glared up at her. "You don't know nothin'," he growled. But Harmon saw it in his eyes. The flicker of fear. The weight of guilt. And she knew in her bones, that he carried the answers to Marcus Hall's disappearance. The warehouse, once silent, now buzzed with activity. Evidence teams swarmed in. They uncovered a grim scene. Old bike parts scattered in the shadows, stripped down frames, burned out engines. A graveyard for stolen dreams. And there, tucked into a corner like a discarded memory, they found something that made Sharon Hall's heart break all over again. A torn fragment of a jacket. Faded, moldy, but unmistakable. Marcus's favorite denim. Proof he had been there. Proof T-Man had lied all these years. Back at the precinct, under harsh fluorescent lights, T-Man sat shackled to a table. Detective Harmon leaned in close. "You owe that boy's mama the truth," she said, voice low and cold. She never stopped looking for him. Not once. Even when the whole damn world forgot. T-Man said nothing, but something cracked in his expression. Just for a moment. And Detective Harmon knew. The real story was about to spill out. The real nightmare was just beginning. T-Man sat in the cold interrogation room, his hands cuffed, his eyes dead. After hours of silence, he finally spoke. "We didn't mean to kill him," he muttered. "It was supposed to be a scare. Take the bike. Teach him a lesson." Marcus had fought back hard. They shoved him, hit him. One blow too many. Marcus's head hit the concrete floor. He didn't move after that. Panic spread fast. T-Man and his crew loaded Marcus's body into a van, dumped it near an old scrapyard, and burned what evidence they could. The dirt bike was stripped and sold piece by piece, until only the frame remained. 7 years later, that frame surfaced again, under another man's name. T-Man stared at the floor as the weight of his words filled the room. Detective Harmon stood and left in silence. There were no words big enough to cover the truth. When Sharon Hall heard the truth, she collapsed in her living room, sobbing into her hands. Her son hadn't abandoned her. He hadn't run away. He had fought for what was his and paid the ultimate price. She clutched Marcus's old photo to her chest, rocking back and forth, whispering his name. The years of not knowing had been torture, but now knowing was its own kind of agony. She lit a candle by his picture and let it burn through the night. T-Man was charged with manslaughter, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. His trial was quick. Witnesses from his old crew testified. Evidence piled up. The jury took only a few hours to convict. He was sentenced to 35 years without the chance of parole. Still, justice felt hollow. Nothing could bring Marcus back. Nothing could return the years lost. But at least finally there was an answer, and a name on the lips of those who once stayed silent. Months later, Sharon visited the spot where her son was last seen alive. She placed a small wooden cross there, tied with a blue ribbon, Marcus's favorite color. As the sun set behind Detroit's crumbling skyline, she stood quietly, feeling the cold wind brush her face. Somewhere, she hoped, Marcus's spirit was finally free. She whispered into the dusk, "I found you, baby. I never gave up." And she never would.